This is Linux Mint 18.2 with the Cinnamon desktop. This is the second point release of version 18 of Linux Mint, which is still based on Ubuntu 16.04 and will be supported until 2021 with bug fixes and security updates. As you can see, this is Cinnamon version 3.4.3, Linux kernel 4.8 generic. If you want or need a long-term support release, this is a good one. The software gets a bit old for my taste, and I normally upgrade my system at least once every 6 months. So I no longer use Linux Mint since it's only available in a long-term support version. But it's still a very good system with lots to recommend it. For one thing, the implementation of Cinnamon in Linux Mint is, in my opinion, far superior to its implementation in other distributions. One thing I'm happy to report is that the network manager finally works perfectly. As you can see, my network is connected. I had trouble with the network manager as recently as version 18.1, which I installed for a friend and just couldn't get it to work. But whatever that problem was, it has been fixed, at least for me. I can't speak for anyone else. This is not the default desktop. I chose it from one of their readily available options. Just right-click on the desktop and left-click on Change Desktop Background. And you see the default Mint desktops. Then the older versions, Sarah, Serena, and the new one, which is Sonia. And this is the one I chose. I got rid of the default desktop icons. I no longer use icons on my desktop with any regularity, although it is obviously possible here. And with this version, you can also organize and sort them better than with earlier versions. Now, there's no Workspace Switcher on the panel by default. You can install one, but I'm using the hot corners for switching. If I go to the upper right, I'm displaying all 4 default workspaces. If I go down here to workspace number 2 and click on this, you'll see that both of these open applications are minimized, but when I go to the upper left, they appear. This shows all open windows in a particular workspace. And of course, if you have no open windows, it won't show anything. And again, going to the upper right shows all workspaces and all windows, whether they're minimized or not. Now you can get to this by going to the menu and going to System Settings here, the little gears. And down here you'll see something called Hot Corners, and it lets you set the hot corners. I prefer not to use the bottom ones since I have a panel at the bottom, and a lot can get mixed up in one place. Also, if you haven't enabled hover, you won't be able to get anything by hovering over those corners. And hovering is now the only way to use those hot corners. As I said, this is still using the old Ubuntu 16.04 package base, so I had to install Simple Screen Recorder with a PPA, which is no longer necessary in the newer versions of Ubuntu. Firefox is usually upgraded on its own schedule. And this is version 54.0, the latest version. However, when I go to LibreOffice, this is version 5.1.6.2, really old and out of date in my opinion. You get a later version than this even in Debian Stretch. Now if I go to the LibreOffice home page and click on Download Now, it's already detected my operating system, and it offers version 5.3.4, the latest stable version, as a deb file, which I could install in Linux Mint with no problems. The problem with installing a deb file is that you don't get updates without something in a repository. So if you want to get updates, the best way is to install a PPA or personal program archive, and like Ubuntu, Linux Mint supports PPAs. One of the difficulties is if you Google upgrade LibreOffice via PPA, you find all kinds of advice, some of it good, some of it appropriate, some of it not so good, and some of it rather misleading. So where do you look for reliable information? I can't tell you I have the final answer, but I'm going to look on launchpad.net, which is an Ubuntu website. It gives you the option of going to LibreOffice Fresh, which is a constantly updated version of LibreOffice. But I'm going to just go to LibreOffice 5.3, so I'm going to click on this option. And here I get a lot of information, which I'm going to skip over. These are two of the three things you have to do. First of all, I'm going to copy this line and paste it into a terminal, and that's sudo space add-apt-repository space PPA : LibreOffice/LibreOffice-5-3. I'm going to press enter, enter my password, press enter again. Now it says press enter to continue or Control-C to cancel. So I'm pressing enter. Now I'm ready for the second line. And that is sudo apt-get update. Sudo space apt-get space update. I'm going to press enter. Now I'm ready for the third line, but what is the third line? They don't give you a third line in this particular reference. Fortunately, I know from other experience the third line is sudo. The third line is sudo space apt hyphen get space upgrade. I already have an older version of LibreOffice installed, so I don't have to install it. I just have to upgrade it. Do I want to continue? Yes. Now it's also doing some other upgrades that were already ready to be installed. But it should have upgraded LibreOffice, so I'm going to check that. And it hasn't. It's version 5.1.6.2. So let me see what I can do. I'm going to go into Synaptic Package Manager. It's under Administration. Enter my password. I'm going to go to Settings, Repositories, and under PPAs, it has the PPA for LibreOffice 5.3 in it. So I'm going to reload. Now I've already got an update notification here, but I'm going to quit that one. And I'm going to go to the Update Manager. And it says here I can upgrade to LibreOffice 5.3. So I'm going to install updates. Okay. Enter my password. Enter my password. Now I'm going to pause the video here just to keep this short. Now my system is up to date. Now I have version 5.3.3.2. Still not the latest, but good enough. So you can see that while PPAs can be relatively simple to use, they can also be rather complex if they're not clear instructions and if you don't follow them to the letter. So I just simply do not recommend long-term support versions of Linux past their first 6 months of life, unless you absolutely need them. For instance, you have an ongoing process, you don't want to have to reinstall everything, or if you're so fearful of installing a new version of Linux that you simply don't want to be bothered with it, then this may be for you. Let me briefly go through some of the other changes in this version. Icons can now be automatically aligned on a grid, either in lines or in columns. They can also be automatically sorted in various ways, by name, by size, by type, by modified date. You can also change desktop icon sizes with a click of a button. Various plugins of the settings daemon are also now running their own separate processes and are independent of each other. The JavaScript interpreter was rebased. The applets have been named cinnamon spices and are maintained by a third party. There's a link to the cinnamon spice website. I'm not going to go through all of these things. This is mislabeled blueberry. They mean Bluetooth. And there's an improvement in the way Bluetooth is supported. They've improved the Xed text editor. And the X player, I don't use it. I use VLC, which is also installed by default. And it's now easier to navigate in Pix. They've cleaned up the X reader, the PDF reader, and improved it, as well as the X viewer for looking at images. The update manager has also been improved in a number of ways. They've slightly changed the way that they rate updates. Most of them are now level 2, and level 5 is not included by default. They've made some improvements to the software sources, and they now use LightDM Display Manager instead of the old default Display Manager. And they show how this is configurable, and of course the new artwork. Now if you look on the home page here, there are now instructions on how to upgrade to Linux Mint 18.2 if you're using version 18.1, and there's a link to the instructions. I'm not going to go into this because I don't like to cover anything that I haven't actually done myself, but you can easily follow these instructions and upgrade if you're using 18.1. So that's Linux Mint 18.2. This is XRAM Tech. Thanks for watching.